They arrived under the cloak of darkness, just after midnight, two men dressed in knockoff police uniforms, their boots thudding heavily against the wooden boards of my secluded front porch. One carried a crowbar, the other a pair of bolt cutters, and both wore the smug confidence of people who believed they had authority. Under the pale light of the moon, their badges gleamed momentarily, until the glint revealed the cheap plastic beneath the spray-painted silver. In their hands was a clipboard holding what looked like an official code violation notice, stapled neatly in place, the kind of fake paperwork that might fool someone less prepared. But these men had no idea they'd been spotted 10 minutes earlier, the moment they'd crept up my private drive in a rusted-out sedan. My infrared perimeter cameras had clocked them before their car engine even cooled. They didn't hear the footfalls closing in from behind, silent, deliberate steps through the pine underbrush, made by people who had moved through these woods 1,000 times before. They didn't notice the silent drone circling above them either, streaming a high-definition feed to the temporary command post I'd set up right there in my kitchen. So when the porch light snapped on and half a dozen red laser dots lit up their chests like ominous Christmas lights, they froze. Reality hit them with the thud of their own crowbar dropping onto the wooden planks. One of them, shaking, lost control completely, the evidence clear in the growing stain on his tactical pants, now illuminated under the glare of the floodlights. This wasn't a hasty setup. It wasn't revenge cooked up in a moment of anger. It was the final act in a carefully crafted response to months of escalating harassment. It had taken weeks to plan and was backed by the kind of operational expertise only a seasoned tactical commander could bring. My name is Mitchell Larson, 48 years old, retired after 25 years leading high-risk operations for the state police. When I finally left that world behind, all I wanted was a quiet life in my mountain cabin at Pine Ridge Estates, a development that boasted of natural serenity, all under the gentle guidance of a homeowners association. I should have known better. That last detail should have set off alarms. I had no use for community potlucks where people judged each other's casserole textures. I didn't care about the HOA-sanctioned lawn edging festivals or curtain color charts that banned anything darker than beige. All I wanted was solitude with my German shepherds, Rex and Duke, a reliable grill, and an emergency pantry built for any kind of disaster. But Patricia Harmon, the HOA president with a hairsprayed helmet of hair and a vendetta against nonconformity, had other plans. She ran Pine Ridge like it was her personal dictatorship, right down to the laminated HOA citation pad she wielded like a holy decree. Patricia was 62, drove a gleaming white Lexus with vanity plates that spelled out her position, and had a smile so polished it could have been carved from ice. Her war against me began subtly, emails fired off with military precision every morning at 7 a.m., always with a read receipt. Just 3 days after I moved in, I got my first message. The subject line: unauthorized wood stacking configuration. Apparently, my firewood was stacked the wrong way, something about angles and neighborhood harmony. It sounded ridiculous, until the $40 fine showed up as a PDF. From there it only escalated: rocking chair movement that was too aggressive, unreported hammock activity, bird feeder capacity violations, and a mailbox that allegedly didn't patina correctly. Each message was more absurd than the last, and when I refused to take them seriously, Patricia doubled down. She started posting warning notices around my property, nailed to trees using a tool she'd proudly purchased for official use. Every notice was laminated, of course, featuring a watermark of the HOA crest and dense paragraphs detailing how I was apparently destroying the community one chipped paint spot at a time. Then came the drones, yes, actual drones, buzzing over my land, looking for infractions. Patricia wasn't just running an HOA, she was waging a war, and she'd picked the wrong target. Yes, actual drones. Not the kind kids fly for fun, but buzzing, camera-equipped pests that hovered over my deck while I tried to enjoy dinner, whining like mechanical mosquitoes. Patricia had escalated from citations to surveillance. And as if that weren't enough, she hired a landscaper to forcibly mow my lawn while I was out buying groceries. I came back to find my carefully cultivated wildflower meadow, grown intentionally to support the local bees, reduced to a uniform green patch that looked like a mini golf course. The worst part? A $300 invoice taped to my front door, demanding immediate payment for what she called emergency compliance mowing. I didn't take it lying down. I dug up the original HOA charter that showed my property was grandfathered in before the lawn requirements even existed. I had a cease and desist letter written up by a lawyer friend and delivered it formally. I even went to an HOA meeting and presented my case calmly, detailing each overreach and violation of my rights while Patricia sat there growing redder with each passing minute. Her smile was gone, replaced by tight-lipped fury. But none of it stopped her. So I shifted tactics and went quiet. I ignored her emails, left her frantic door poundings unanswered, and treated her as though she no longer existed. Patricia mistook my silence for surrender. That was her first mistake. Her second? Assuming I'd severed all ties with the men I used to serve beside. Her third, and by far her biggest, was what she pulled the following Tuesday night. After the lawn ambush, I installed a hidden security system around my entire property. Cameras, motion sensors, discrete alerts linked directly to my phone. And sure enough, at exactly 11:47 p.m. that Tuesday, an alert pinged. I checked the feed and saw two men in mismatched tactical gear climbing out of a beat-up Honda Civic and creeping toward my mailbox. They tried to carry themselves with authority, but to me, it was clear they were amateurs, moving with the clumsy posture of mall cops trying to play elite operatives. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't just any Tuesday night. Jake Morrison, one of my oldest squad mates, was visiting for our annual reunion weekend. Within minutes of my call, Jake had roused the 5 other retired SWAT members who were camping on the back 40 of my property. These weren't guys who played soldier on weekends. They were the real thing, veterans of drug busts, hostage rescues, high-risk entries. They'd spent decades training for chaos, and frankly, they missed it. So while Patricia's so-called enforcers tried to sneak up my driveway, my team sprang into coordinated action like they'd never left the field. Jake set up drone oversight from my kitchen command post. Tommy and Marcus took up flanking positions on the eastern tree line. Rodriguez and Bennett handled the western approach. Davidson, our newest retiree, monitored the feeds and coordinated comms. Every one of them had a grin on their face, like they'd been handed an early Christmas gift. At exactly 12:14 a.m., the fake officers reached my front porch. I listened through the mic as they whispered about which window might be easiest to breach. One of them, wiry and nervous, had a neck tattoo and was reading from some pathetic HOA enforcement script on his phone. The other, round and lumbering, jiggled the door handle while muttering about finding contraband to justify breaking in. That's when I hit the switch. Every floodlight on the property flared to life at once, turning the night into a surgical theater. Then came the red laser dots, 6 of them, settling on the men's chests as my friends materialized from the shadows. Jake's voice cut through the night like thunder. "Drop your weapons and get on the ground. Now." It was the same command voice that had ended dozens of standoffs. The two froze. Neck Tattoo dropped his crowbar so fast it smacked his foot. Beer Gut turned to bolt, only to find Marcus standing directly in his path, 6 feet 4 inches, built like a battering ram, arms crossed and unflinching. Within 30 seconds, they were zip-tied and whimpering, sputtering about how they were just following orders, how they didn't mean any real harm. Tommy stood watch while Jake calmly called the sheriff's department to collect our new guests. I brought up the security footage on my laptop, meticulously saving copies, Patricia's license plate captured clearly at the foot of my driveway and her silhouette unmistakable in the passenger seat. She hadn't just sent those two in, she'd come along for the show. Sitting comfortably in her white Lexus, she was live-streaming the whole operation on Facebook with the bold caption, "Taking back the neighborhood from rogue elements." Moments later, the sheriff's department rolled in hard, lights cutting through the night and sirens wailing like banshees. Deputies spilled out of their cruisers and found Patricia in a frenzy, trying to delete her live stream while simultaneously insisting this was all a sanctioned HOA inspection. She was sweating hairspray and denial. Deputy Chen, an old colleague from my state police days, glanced at the cuffed imposters on my porch, then back at me with a smirk. "Mitchell, what did you do now?" he asked, half laughing. I handed over the printed logs of harassment, the forged warrant, the footage of the break-in attempt, and the crown jewel, Patricia's own live stream, where she outright admitted hiring those two buffoons to teach me a lesson. The deputies perked up when they saw the part where she offered them a bonus for digging up anything illegal that could be used against me. They didn't find contraband, but they sure found a conspiracy. Patricia was pulled from her luxury cocoon like a hermit crab getting evicted, kicking and yelling the whole way. She screamed about her authority as HOA president and demanded an audience with the sheriff. At one point, she even tried to hand Deputy Chen a citation for improper parking of a law enforcement vehicle. Even her hired muscle, Brandon, neck tattoo, Tierney and Carl, beer gut, Moss, looked ashamed as they were loaded into separate squad cars. That's when the legal consequences began to fall like dominoes. Brandon and Carl were both charged with impersonating officers, attempted breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit property damage. Brandon had priors for theft, and Carl was already on probation for assault. The moment real jail time was on the table, they turned on Patricia like rats escaping a sinking ship, spilling every detail of her plan. Patricia herself was hit with a raft of charges: felony conspiracy, criminal solicitation, and targeted harassment. I added fuel to the fire with a civil suit, intentional infliction of emotional distress, trespassing, property rights violations, and every documented absurdity she'd thrown at me for the past 8 months. My lawyer, who'd been practically begging me to let him loose on her, dove into the case like a shark in bloodied water. He calculated damages for everything: mowing the wildflowers, the drones, the nighttime assault, even the psychological toll of living under HOA tyranny. By Wednesday morning, the HOA board scrambled to hold an emergency meeting. I stayed home, but Jake's wife, Nancy, attended. According to her, it was like watching live courtroom drama, complete with finger-pointing and tearful backpedaling. Every board member claimed ignorance of Patricia's antics. Their attorney reportedly turned the color of spoiled milk after seeing the liability exposure. They voted unanimously to strip her of her title and banned her from all HOA involvement, forever. Then came the professional fallout. Patricia worked as an office manager for a property management company, the irony thick enough to slice with a knife. When her employer got wind of her criminal charges, she was suspended pending investigation, Corporate Code 4, don't bother coming back. Without her job, she couldn't keep up the payments on her beloved white Lexus, which was repossessed 2 weeks later. As for the criminal case, it never even made it to trial. Her lawyer, realizing the strength of the evidence stacked against her, pushed for a plea deal. She caved. Guilty on conspiracy and harassment, with the felony charge dropped in exchange for probation. The judge handed down a sentence that included 2 years of probation, $500 in community service specifically focused on tenant rights education, and $40,000 in restitution, enough to cover my legal fees, damages, and then some. When the verdict was read aloud in court, Patricia's face cycled from red to purple to a deathly shade of pale. She fainted right there in front of the judge and had to be revived by the bailiff. Justice, at long last, had arrived, complete with paperwork, witnesses, and a very satisfying thud.